Um, I would have had a video done sooner, but I came home, my internet was down. I don't know what happened. There's a fire truck and an ambulance. There was some kind of an accident, so somebody took out the entire cable in the area because all of the Wi-Fi, open Wi-Fi that I was able to find locally, nobody had internet, and my phone wasn't working either. I get my phone through the cable company, so instead of recording, I don't even use the internet for. I do this with the camera software through Windows. But I decided to watch Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock today because I'm having a Star Trek kind of month, and it's not as good as Khan, but it's got its own charm. Anyways, also on a mental note here, while I was at work, somebody told me that Jeannie Bouchard had got eliminated. She'd been up 4 games to 1 and then blew the first set, lost 6-4, and lost the second set 6-2. And I came home and I was all ready to say, "See, I told you that's how Jeannie plays, and she has one bad point, and then it all falls apart." But she lost to Angelique Kerber. Angelique Kerber is one of the best tennis players in the world, and there is no shame in losing to Kerber. Um, what Jeannie needs to do is get her rankings back up so that she's not facing an Angelique Kerber in the second round. That's what Jeannie's got to do. Um, and I honestly I don't think it's anything physical with her game. I think it's entirely psychological. I think she has all of the physical tools to be a very, very good tennis player. I don't know if she has the physical tools to be a number one. Very few have that. Milos Raonic has spent years near in the top 10. And I think she could do the same on the women's side. I don't know that she would ever be a number one, but she'll get close. Like Angelique Kerber is not a number one right now. Um, Freaking Serena Williams is just a machine, but uh, she's number two in the Olympics, which is pretty cool. And again, no harm, no foul. Jeannie, I won't say a bad word about her right now because Angelique Kerber is my favorite tennis player, anyways. So I regret that I was at work and didn't get to see the matchup between the two of them. Because again, much like when Dallas plays Vancouver or Dallas plays Boston, if two tennis players are against each other I really enjoy watching, I don't care who wins. I don't think that happens in other sports. Football, maybe when the Chargers play the Bengals, I can kind of be impartial. However, because football is only a 16 game season, normally I want one of the teams to win because I know like if San Diego's 1 game out of first place in their division and the Bengals are way ahead, the Bengals don't need the game, so I want San Diego to win it. That kind of thing. But yeah, tennis, I have games where I just enjoy just watching, and hockey, I have that too, but not as much with the Canucks. Now, somebody mentioned, and you know what? I'm like, what the hell? Um, I know I talked about the Canucks yesterday, but again, what the hell? Um, Rivalries. Somebody asked about the Canucks rivalries. Um, the rivalries for the Canucks are mainly geographical, and they're the obvious ones. So there's there's a couple ways to go through it. I mean, there's the personal rivalries. I think Brad Marchand is obvious. Uh, Milan Lucic is rival as well. I mean, for all of the overtures that Benning was ready to make, and oh, we're going to get him on our team. Lucic has had some battles with Vancouver, and players in the Canucks locker room, Ryan Miller is an example, might have a hard time with Lucic in the same jersey as them. I mean, they'll get used to it. They're professionals, but when all that talk was going around, all I kept thinking was, don't Ryan Miller and Milan Lucic basically hate one another? I mean, Luch did take that cheap shot running headshot at Miller when Miller was vulnerable. I'm one who believes that if the goalies come out of the net, they're fair game. I think you should be able to check them. I think you should be able to, but fair. And what Luch did was basically it was a freight train running over a bunny rabbit on the tracks. Like it was absolutely scary. Um, and I didn't like it. And I'm not a Sabres fan. I'm not a Ryan Miller fan particularly. And I'm a huge Bruins fan, but I remember seeing that and going, that's not cool. And then Afterwards, Luch was kind of like, oh, well, it was not that big a deal. And it's like, dude, you fucking headshotted him. How can that not be a big deal? Um, I pick up too that right now when the Canucks play the Ducks, that the Canucks really want to beat Ryan Kessler. Um, Usually the Canucks get slaughtered by the Ducks. There's a rivalry there though. Um, there's sort of a rivalry with Buffalo in that they both came into the league at the same time, but that rivalry was bigger in the 80s than it is now. I know back when Joel Perreault was leading scorer for Buffalo that, it was always a dig at the Canucks that it was a toss of a coin. The winner gets Joe Perreault and the loser doesn't. And the Canucks drafted Dale Talon. Yes, that Dale Talon, the GM of the Florida Panthers, who was a GM of the Blackhawks. Fantastic GM. Good hockey player. No Joe Perreault. Not even close. Gilbert Perreault um, was magic, and if he had been a Canuck instead of a Sabre, who knows how things could have been different. There's always a rivalry with Calgary. Um, and I know I try to be um, impartial on my channel here, but I gotta say, when the Canucks play against Calgary, I want Furlan to be driven through the boards so frigging hard. And there's nobody in a Vancouver jersey who is capable of doing so. You could say Dorset. Dorset isn't in Furlan's territory right now. Um, and Press didn't play long enough in Vancouver for me to have any faith in him to take Furlan. I'm not going to say out, but maybe make him think about the way he plays the game. Maybe make him think about the cheap shots that he delivers. And I'm not a fan of his game particularly, and I don't think I would be if he was on a team I cheered for either. Um, and there's always a sense of gratification. I remember poor Jeff Reese was in that a game Vancouver won. I think it was 11-1 was the final, and that was the most fun I've ever had watching a hockey game. I think, although there was one game where the Canucks beat the hell out of Montreal that I enjoyed quite a bit as well. But when Vancouver beat Calgary and whooped them, that was great. I felt bad for Jeff Reese because I didn't mind him as a goaltender. Again, the most popular guy in the locker room is usually the backup, but it was fun to watch. Oh man, it was fun to watch Calgary just get absolutely slaughtered. Um, I'm just going through alphabetical. Obviously, Chicago and Vancouver have had a rivalry. I don't know how strong that is now. There's been so much turnover in both lineups, and their last meeting in the playoffs was 2011. So it's getting to the point where that's going to die off. They're not in the same division. So the odds of them meeting in the playoffs again are pretty slim. They had a rivalry with Colorado in the late 90s. The rivalry basically involved Dan Cloutier standing strong. Colorado would score a goal, and Cloutier would give up and allow 3 or 4 more. And it was usually just a matter of when does that first goal go in and when does Cloutier shut off and just basically stand aside and go on, go on, the net's open, I don't care. Um, no, Cloutier had some kind of a mental thing with Colorado. He could allow a bad goal against almost any other team and it wouldn't bother him. But man, Colorado, he would just get mad and then he'd lose his focus and they'd just start going in. And then it was like, get Scudra, get whoever our backup is this week. Um, Peter Scooter was a weird one too. He was good for the Canucks as a backup that one year, but Crawford just wouldn't play him. Crawford didn't like him. It wouldn't matter how well he played the night before. He would be like, oh no no no, Cloutier's going back in, and it's like, but Scooter is the better goaltender. Um, there isn't a rivalry with Dallas and Vancouver. There could have been. I know they've met in the playoffs twice in the last decade, but there isn't really a rivalry there. Um, twice in the last decade? No, it was once in the last decade. They met in '94. They met in 2007. Yeah, it's been that long. Uh, Detroit. Eh, again, at one point there was a rivalry because Detroit beat Vancouver in the playoffs, but it was a stomping. And again, Nick Lidstrom from center ice. Sorry to Mr. Cloutier because I really like Dan Cloutier. Regular season, I had no problem with Dan Cloutier. I thought he was a fantastic starting goaltender. In the playoffs, usually by then he was nursing injuries and he would hide them. Everybody remembers he allowed a lot of bad goals. What I remember is after the playoffs were over, very often injuries would be reported. And it would be, oh, he's had a bad knee, or he's had a pulled groin, or maybe his shoulder. Like, and then it'd be like, okay, so he didn't play really poorly because he's not very good. He played poorly because he was hurting, and his pride wouldn't allow him to report it. And I think that shortened his career. I know by the time the Kings signed him, he was all beat up, and he just couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't even hide the injuries anymore. Kings, yeah, the Kings have been a rival, but again, it's kind of a touch and go thing. Um, right now, I don't think I'd qualify the Kings as a rival either, because it's been such a lopsided series. Like for a rivalry to really be hot and contested, it has to be hotly contested. Teams have to be close to one another, and with where Vancouver is right now in the standings, I mean from last season, okay, 28th overall, and Canucks fans can spin it however they want. Look, you're 12 spots below the playoffs, and Louis Eriksson doesn't make up for 12 spots. It just doesn't happen that way. So it's hard to qualify a rival for them right now. I think for the Canucks right now, the rivalry might be with their fans. I know that sounds weird, but um, there are fans that expect playoffs every year. And when the end of October rolls around, if they're, say, 3-8, something like that, and it's obvious it's just not happening this year, maybe the Sedins are just not premier first line forwards anymore, fans are going to turn. Not a lot of them, but enough. There's going to be empty seats in the stands. There's going to be a lot of Jason Botchford. Botchford will be in his glory. The the difference that I put between my opinion and my um, editorials regarding the Canucks and Botchford's is this: Botchford almost seems to enjoy when the Canucks are down, and even when they're up, he finds something wrong. He finds something to criticize. So let's say the Canucks were on a 10-game winning streak, but Ryan Miller had sat those whole 10 games, and they were just riding a hot hand with Markstrom. He would write an article about how Ryan Miller was upset and Ryan Miller wanted out, and they were disrespecting Ryan Miller, and how they're spending $6 million on a guy that's not playing a game. This is how he reports on things for Vancouver. It's always bothered me. And Tony Gallagher does it somewhat too. I remember back in the day when Burke was here, the biggest rivalry was Brian Burke and Tony Gallagher. Holy Lord. Burke, I really genuinely think would have choked him out. Wouldn't have killed him, but he would have choked him until he was passed out and then thrown him in a corner somewhere. Burke did not like Vancouver media. And because of the fact that controversy sells, the Vancouver media often will go with the lowest common denominator. One of the things that I've seen comments on my channel, well, like you should be this and should be that. I wouldn't fit into that category because, if I'm sitting down on a TSN panel, first off, I wouldn't wear my normal hockey. I'd wear regular clothes that regular people wear. There wouldn't be any jerseys. But, when it's all doom and gloom and doom and gloom, I wouldn't buy into it. And the weird thing with me is I would probably, if you ask me to look at the Canucks right now with where they are, okay, and why did these rivals get ahead of them? Why did the Kings and the Flames and all these teams get beyond them? And believe me, with the goaltending the Flames picked up in the offseason, right now they are light years ahead of Vancouver. There's a number of factors that cause this. When the Sedins were free agents, I was an advocate for letting them go. I was not an advocate for letting them go 3 years ago because I disliked them. I love the Sedins. I think they're fantastic players. I was an advocate of letting them go because it would free up the cap space. I knew that the odds of the Canucks winning a Stanley Cup with the Sedins were diminished. I wanted to see if they could sign contracts somewhere else and perhaps the Sedins could win a cup before they retired. And while at this stage I'm completely happy with them retiring Canucks, um, I believed at the time that the amount of money that they were spending on the Sedins was probably not going to help them in the long term. And when Mike Gillis watched the Canucks get within one game of the Stanley Cup in 2011, he became a rival because he decided, okay, this team is good enough to win a Stanley Cup. That's a fair assessment after they were 1 win away. But he signed everybody. And when you look at teams like Chicago and Pittsburgh, and even Boston to some extent, they were able to stay in contention by looking at their team and going, okay, we got close. Or in their case, they won. But we've got parts we don't like. So rather than sign everybody and try to keep the entire team together, we need to continue trying to improve. Gillis decided to try to keep everybody under the cap. So in order to get them to take less money than they would have made on the free market, he gave them all no trade clauses. All of them. No movement clauses, no trade clauses for everybody. Everybody craps on Chris Higgins having a no movement clause, no trade clause. Chris Higgins got that because he was genuinely one of the best forwards the Canucks had in 2011. He was fantastic. And at the time that contract was signed, the $2.5 million was considered a bargain. That's why he signed for less money than he would have been worth on the market, because he had certainty that the Canucks wouldn't just move him. And at the time all these no trade clauses were signed, I remember Canucks fans saying, "Good, we're keeping this whole team together. This is fantastic, and we're staying under the cap." And all I kept thinking was that things can change fast. And now Benning is having to clean up that mess. Now, where Benning loses me is that he keeps trading away young assets on entry-level contracts for guys who aren't on any entry-level contracts. And the statement that I've heard from Canucks fans is, well, he's getting guys that are 3 or 4 years further down the road in terms of their development. Okay, but is he trading guys with a higher ceiling for their development than the guys he's getting? Because that's what I'm seeing. And that is one of two things. It's impatience or it's desperation. It's I need to keep my job, so I don't have time to wait for McCann to develop. I don't have time to wait for Forsling to develop. I don't have time to wait for Shinkarik to develop. Maybe these guys don't become what we think they're going to be, so I'm going to trade them off. I'm going to get Clendenning. I'm going to get Granlund. I'm going to get Goodbranson. And okay, Clendenning played 12 games for us. He's not all that great. I'm going to trade him to Pittsburgh, and I'm going to get Brack Sutter. Sutter's older than Clendenning and Bonino, but Sutter's what we need right now. There's an air of panic to the moves, and this is what I tried to bring across in the Jared McCann video, where I was reacting to the trade negatively. And again, when I look at the team right now, I think it's going to be a long season. I genuinely think the Canucks are in for a very long season. What I find funny is that people watch other videos of mine and they poach which ones they watch, and I'll get typical Canucks fan. Typical Canucks fan. Then you're not watching these videos. If you're going to watch a video where I talk about the Leafs, or a video where I talk about Ottawa or whoever, and I say, look, playoffs are a challenge, maybe they don't make the playoffs, and I get typical Canucks fan. Well, wait a minute. I'm acknowledging the Canucks are behind everybody. If I'm predicting the standings this year, I have the Canucks still in 28th. And I have Carolina behind them. They might be 29th. And that's okay, because it's not happening this season. But it's going to be a rough year. I'm looking forward to watching it. I'm looking forward to watching it because I want to see how Bo Horvat develops. I want to see if Jakob Markstrom can be a starting goaltender for a full season. I want to see if Ryan Miller's fallen back and if he's going to get something at the trade deadline. I hope Miller has a great season so he gets something back for the Canucks at the trade deadline. I want to see if Burrows has any hope of recapturing what he had 3 years ago. I want to see if the Sedins have chemistry with Louis Eriksson that can actually win them some games. I'm not concerned with let's tank for the number 1 pick, because yes, Toronto got the number 1 pick with Austin Matthews, but Buffalo tried it the year before and they didn't get Connor McDavid. They got Jack Eichel, the number 2 pick, but that was the consolation prize. As much as I like Eichel, he's not McDavid. So you can't tank and say, oh, well, we're going to get Nolan Patrick because there's three lottery spots. You could draft fourth. So why not just do your best and see what happens? But it's going to be a long season. I'm going to do videos soon where I predict each division. I'll go through each division and why I've got teams predicted where I've got them predicted, which is going to lead to all kinds of flames against me. Um, because people are like, well, we play really well against so and so, and I'm looking at this year because just because your team played well against somebody last year doesn't mean they're going to play well against them this year. The matchups change from year to year. That's how things work. But in Vancouver, I'm curious because when I'm asked about Vancouver rivalries right now, I think the greatest rivalry could be with their fans, and it could be with patience because ownership isn't patient. Ownership's leaning on Benning. We want the playoffs, and understandable. It's a difference of, potentially tens of millions of dollars. It could be the difference between making money and making serious money. So I don't blame them for wanting the playoffs. And 16 teams out of 30 make it. It's a 50-50 shot, right? So it shouldn't be that hard, right? It is. It is that hard. And there's no quick fix. I mean, this shirt I'm wearing here, this is my Kevin Bieksa shirt. When he went to Anaheim, I had no problem with it. Because Bieksa doesn't get the Canucks back in the playoffs either. I just wish he hadn't gone to the Ducks. I do. I do. I wish, if I was going to cheer for BX to win a Stanley Cup, it wasn't Anaheim. I'd have to cheer for it to get it. But, you know, it is what it is. And the fact that BX and Kessler play together, one of my least favorite players in Kessler, and one of my absolute favorite players ever in Bieksa, and it's not fair. It's not fair. Maybe Bieksa gets a trade to, say, Pittsburgh at the deadline. Maybe the Ducks, have some kind of a moment where they realize we want a younger guy in the top four than Bieksa, and they move him to Pittsburgh, and then Pittsburgh wins another Stanley Cup, and I can watch Bieksa win a Stanley Cup and not have to watch Kessler win one. But anyways, so yeah, that's my take on current Canucks rivalries. And if you look back over the past, I mean, there's been some here and there, but right now, the biggest rival is going to be the fans who want to win right now, because I don't see it happening. And I say that as a guy who wants the Canucks to win a Stanley Cup desperately. It's not happening this year. And if the general manager makes moves that are reactionary, and if he doesn't have patience with the young kids and just trades them off for proven commodities to try to get closer to the playoffs, it's going to cost them in the long term. It is really going to cost them in the long term. I mean, there's a lot of variables this year. Like if let's say you Levy comes in and he's lights out and he's fantastic and he's ready this year and he's the power play point man we need. I'll eat my words. The Canucks won't finish 28th if they have a power play point man who, can be that everyday guy. Because they haven't had a power play point man in a long time. Jason Garrison was supposed to be that, and I think Garrison took a lot of flack in Vancouver because of how much money he made, but he's a good defenseman. And I honestly still don't understand why they just gave him up. I still don't understand it. I think there was other players they could have given up and got under the cap that would have been a smarter choice than Garrison. It was, Garrison's home team. He wanted to play in Vancouver. I just don't understand it. Anyways, so that's my take on things right now with Vancouver, and I will be back with more videos later. And yeah, thanks for watching.